Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. We're waking up with watches this weekend, and everything is for sale. To inquire about prices, email me directly, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. We're also looking to build inventory. We like to buy, trade, and sell all three, all through the same email address. We'll buy one watch or an entire collection. We pay cash, full value, no upper limit on value paid. We will buy your whole collection of Grubel Forces. Reach out to tmosso@thewatchbox.com for pricing, trades, and sales. Now, jumping straight in, the watch I promised, a 2021 release, and one that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me until I had it in person. This is the Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra Small Seconds. Now, this is a particularly fetching version because it combines a lovely panoply of shades in a beautiful size, 41 millimeters. You can see it's basically a steel watch. We'll get a little bit closer here. But it includes Sedna red gold. Now this is two-tone done right. It is genuinely luxurious and opulent. The dial is gray blue, slate blue. I'm not sure how you want to describe it, but Omega describes it as a gray blue metallic, and I would endorse that. You can see there is a sunburst pattern that radiates out from under the hands, but then there's also a lateral striation that's designed to evoke the deck of high-end yachts. They call it the teak deck dial. There's a slightly dropped seconds track and minutes track outboard in matte silver, and then we have these lovely rose gold plated applique as well as marquee logo and hands. And if you look closely, you can see the hands are alternately satinated and polished, which creates a really handsome contrast. The small seconds has several different concentric layers. You've got the rose gold chaptering, you've got the silver inner dial, and then you have the slate blue inner dial. You also have the date window, and the watch includes a number of subsidiary setting modes, so if you want to set the watch, you can do it two ways. The first is a hour jumper system. Now you'll note the seconds hand keeps ticking. I can actually set the date forward or backwards depending on which way I'm traveling internationally, and I also have stop seconds. So this is a great watch for travelers. It's also 150 meters water resistant and virtually immune to magnetism. So this is a very resilient timepiece. We have that same slate gray blue rubber strap, but the rubber strap has a contrasting stitch, which makes it look a little bit like leather. And on the reverse side, you can see master chronometer, caliber 8916, 2 barrels, 60-hour power reserve, highly shock resistant, anti-magnetic, and again, well protected against water down to 150 meters. It has a coaxial escapement, and it is very, very accurate, tested as a fully cased up watch to the ISO chronometer standards, the 3159, but it's tested as a full watch in 6 positions, not 5, and power reserve, winding efficiency, durability, anti-magnetism, and water resistance are part of the master chronometer test. Now, it has a full deploying clasp. We'll throw it on my wrist. My wrist is 16 centimeters in circumference, and again, this is the 41 millimeter version. It's actually a nice match for the blue of my cuff, but the watch is 13.5 millimeters thick, which actually makes it on the slimmer side for modern Omega timepieces. Very accurate, very durable, very handsome, and very versatile. It's your sports watch, your dress watch, and if you're so inclined, it's your only watch all in one. All right, jumping from one only watch candidate to another. Now we have a true traveler's watch. This is the 42 millimeter Explorer II from Rolex. This is the model that came out in 2011 and was made through 2019. Now, taking a quick look at the watch, pardon me, I should say through 2020. Taking a quick look at the watch, you can see it's got a lovely white dial. The polar dial, as it's known, is truly white. It's not silver white, and it is most definitely not a matte or sunburst. It's a white lacquer that has the look of chalk. It's a very handsome contrast with the blackened white gold hands and indices, and you can see there are a few well-chosen splashes of orange on this dial, along with a lapping machine-laid sunburst bezel. So you can see this has the look of the 1970s Steve McQueen Explorer IIs, as well as a very modern aesthetic, as it is broad and flat, 12.8 millimeters thick and 42 millimeters across. In this particular size and aspect ratio, the Oyster case looks more like a cushion case profile than a round watch. Now, it's 100 meters water resistant. It's very comfortable on the wrist. It's very flat flush. It's a watch that I would recommend for a wrist as small as 15 centimeters circumference. No smaller than that, though, because it is quite broad. It's flat and it's broad, and you can see across the wrist, it takes up quite a bit of real estate on on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, but it's flat enough that it will slide underneath the cuff. A chronometer, very, very precise. We'll do a quick loom shot here. Rolex tests these watches to +2, -2 seconds per 24 hours as fully cased watches. So while they do chronometer certify, they go beyond the chronometer standard of timing. Taking a quick look now at the Aqua Terra, just because I feel like I shorted you guys. Now you can see even the small seconds hand is loomed. Now let's see if you can guess the next one. I think some of you might have an idea. That's right, it is the latest version of the GMT-Master II, a watch that has a lovely combination of dress watch and sports watch attributes. Now, you've got the Jubilee bracelet. That came back in 2018 after the better part of a decade off the market. It was an original feature of the GMT Masters back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and for part of the 2000s, but with the 6-digit references, we lost that option. Well, it's back, and here you can see the combination of the black and blue bezel with the Jubilee bracelet, which I should mention in its solid link form, solid end links, solid center links. It's actually durable enough to be a sports bracelet, and in that regard, it wears a little bit better than the Oyster. So the Oyster used to be the no-holds-barred sports watch bracelet, but with the reinforcements to the Jubilee, you get a lot of advantages. First, you can see that it's much better at venting the wrist as you have a lot of gaps between the links on the underside, whereas you have a whole lot less in terms of gapping and venting underneath the Oyster. Plus, you've got those solid links. It's no longer a tinsel-like bracelet. The old Jubilees were fragile. This one is not. You have the EasyLink 5mm adjustment system. Both of these watches feature that 5mm tool-free adjustment, as well as 3 divots drilled inside the clasp so you can change the anchoring point of the bracelet. Now, throwing it on the wrist, again, 40mm. This one's a little bit thinner. It's about 12.2mm thick, so it is slimmer than the Explorer II. It has a 24-hour bezel that's bidirectional rotating with a ceramic insert, and we'll demonstrate that in just a second. As you can see, it turns in both directions because it's not a dive bezel. It is designed to allow you to offset from your destination. So this is how this works. You set the 24-hour hand to GMT. You set the local time to whatever you please. It's a true dual-time watch. But then, as you are presumably a pilot wearing your GMT-Master II, you use the GMT offset of your destination, and assuming that 24-hour hand is set to GMT, you might add or subtract to find a third time zone temporarily on the bezel. That's how that works. Now, this has the upgraded movement with a 70-hour power reserve. It's still just as tough, just as fine, just as accurate as the previous calibers. It's just a little bit longer legged. All right, going way upscale now with integrated bracelet sports watches. Here's something spectacular. From Audemars Piguet, this is a 2019 model year limited edition of 200 pieces in white gold. It's the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Frosted Gold Chronograph. This watch is unbelievable. It uses a special technique, or I should say the artisan who creates it uses a special technique using a miniature drill bit to frost the entire surface of the upper bezel, the case hoods, and the bracelet. And a standard Royal Oak bracelet without any of these embellishments takes about 9 to 11 hours to hand finish. It is much, much more when the frosted gold finish is applied. Now, it's a 41mm reference 26331, so it is white gold 41mm Royal Oak chronograph. It has a deep purple Grande Tapisserie dial, as Audemars Piguet describes it, deep purple. Hard rock fans, rejoice, your watch has arrived. Now, the watch does include a remarkably white aesthetic, which leaves me to believe that this white gold may have been flashed in rhodium, palladium, or platinum, because it is truly white, not gray gold, but white, and blazing silver surrounding that lovely dial. This dial is cut on a pantograph lathe. The Petite and the Grande Tapisserie are cut on pantograph. The Royal Oak Offshore's Mega is stamped. Now, you can see the bezel bolts are white gold, and they're actually there's a slightly warmer white gold than the bezel, which is why I think this has all been rhodium, palladium, or platinum plated. And you can see the same thing on the crown sides. The flanks of the crowns are beautifully polished. Case back reveals that this is part of a series of 200 pieces, and it's a thin watch, only 11mm. So though it is huge across the wrist, it is a broad timepiece. It wears more like a 43. You can see that it does fit very flat and slides underneath the cuff. Now, curiously, I've heard talk that this particular finish is actually quite good at absorbing scratches and scuffs without displaying them, which is the opposite of what I would have anticipated, but apparently we've got enough real-world tales of this finish to know that it holds holds up pretty well in daily use, in fact better than conventional AP polish or satination. Now the watch is 50 meters water resistant with a screw down crown, which means it's surface swimmable. Automatic winding, it does have decent lume, so no problems there, and a Frédéric Piguet 1185 automatic chronograph caliber, so 40 hours of power reserve. It has a column wheel and a vertical clutch, so it's very smooth, integrated, thin, hand adjusted, and finally finished. This is a great movement for a high horology chrono, and it is up to the standard of Audemars Piguet. It's built not that far away, in fact. Audemars Piguet out of the Vallée du Joux, giving us exceptional watches for 50 years this year from the Royal Oak collection, and this is the Essential Royal Oak, the Jumbo. In its current reference, 15202, of course, this is the BA in yellow gold. Spectacular. In 2016, Audemars Piguet started to reissue a yellow gold Royal Oaks. Now, yellow gold with the blue dial is a very dramatic design. You can see this is the Petite Tapisserie. I can bring in the Grand, and you can see that it is a larger hobnail. It's a bigger set of hobnails, but it's created using the same pantograph lathe. This is the petite hobnail, as originally introduced in 1972 on the Royal Oak 5402. That was the first Royal Oak, and you can see that that design lives here. Signature down at 6 o'clock, blue dial, petite. You've got the case and the bracelet hand finished. You can see that the degree of finishing is outstanding, with vertical satination on the flanks of the bracelet links, a little bevel on the edge. You can see the tops are satinated, and then the ends of the intermediate links are polished in a place where you can hardly even see it, but that's a sign of integrity. Finishing where you'll rarely see the finish. The case is beautifully executed with a diminishing bevel that thins out at the mid-case and expands over the lug hoods, and you can see that the character lines of the bezel continue through the mid-case and the case back. This is a J-series watch. The watch includes the celebrated veteran caliber 2121, which is only 3.05 millimeters thick with the date. Now, it's based on the JLC 920, a movement that launched in 1967, commissioned by AP, Patek, and Vacheron, and only ever used by those brands. This is the same movement that powered the first Nautilus Jumbo, the Vacheron 222, and the Royal Oak 5402. So this is a heritage caliber, and of course, the Royal Oak Jumbo is the only one of the Holy Trinity sports watches that's still using this hand-finished movement in the year 2022. It's a 40-hour automatic. It has a beryllium ring that wraps all the way around and sits on 4 ruby bearings, so the bridge and the rotor can be almost flush together without any danger of the rotor or the mass contacting the bridges and plates. The balance is a Gyromax free-sprung architecture. It beats away to very vintagey 19,800 vibrations per hour, and the finishing standard you get here, particularly the bevels, is a higher standard than you'll find on series production Audemars Piguet watches. This, the Jumbo, whether in precious metal or stainless steel, is always one of the scarcest Audemars Piguet watches and built at a lower volume. Here's a watch that guys love, and I have to say, prior to the 2014 Calibre de Cartier Diver, this was probably the modern Cartier watch design most beloved of male watch collectors. So in 2002, Cartier came out with the Roadster, a sports watch inspired by the imagery of historic sports cars from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And you can also see there's a little bit of hot rod imagery here with the French taillights being referenced by the screws set into the case. We've got an overrider, much like a bumper or a Dagmar or even a bullet-style tail light. And you can see that line continues into the magnifier that tapers over the dial. There's a lot of lovely automotive imagery outside as well as inside, where the dial looks like the clocks, tachometers, and speedometers you'd find on the dashboard of 1950s Mercedes, Porsche, Jaguar vehicles, and it's a gorgeous look with the tachymeter inboard, making this sportier than your standard Roadster. Now, one of the best things about this watch is it is a real sports watch. So it's automatic winding, fully loomed, 100 meters water resistant, full stainless steel construction, and this is the watch that I most often hear collectors declare they would like to see reissued. So perhaps Cartier could bring back the Roadster, but until it does, people seek out well-maintained examples of the original reference. It introduced one of the first quick-release lug systems in the industry, and this has been licensed for use by other Richemont brands since then. Cartier still makes straps that you can use to change the look of your watch. You can use the factory bracelet, which is lovely, but you can also put it on leather if you wish and make it a little bit more formal. You can also easily snap the end link right back into the case. This is a little bit different than a standard Roadster in that it has a screw-down crown, which improves its water resistance. They're all 100 meters water resistant. This one's just a little bit more so. We have a hacking or stop seconds function, and then we have a quick set for the date. The watch includes a ETA 2894 movement inside, which is a modular version of a chronograph. It's a 2892 with an ETA module on top, and it has a vertical clutch, which makes the engagement very, very smooth. It's a bidirectional winder that features 42 hours of power reserve, and again, because it does have the vertical clutch, you can see when I start the chronograph, there's no jump to the seconds hand. It's completely seamless. We'll throw this watch on the wrist. It's stainless steel, 42.6 millimeters, but it wears substantial. You really need to think of this as more like a 44 on the wrist. The case itself is not terribly broad, but the end links of the bracelet do visually and physically extend the watch quite a bit. So you're going to want a wrist at least 15 centimeters circumference to wear this watch well, though I should mention it's not all that thick, being just over 12 millimeters thick. It's 12.4 millimeters thick, and that will slide underneath the cuff. This is one of the most desirable versions of the Cartier Roadster and a highly sought model. Moser Cie of Schaffhausen, Switzerland, is the other manufacturer out of Schaffhausen. The first is IWC, which makes about 100,000 watches a year. Moser makes about 1,500, and they are all distinctive. Here you can see the Endeavour Perpetual calendar. The watch is in pink gold, 40.8 millimeters in diameter. It has these little recesses in the flanks of the lugs. The way you get this exceptional depth with these concave mirror-polished lugs is you have to machine your cases and then hand finish them. And most watch brands cheaply stamp their case, which is fine for mass production, but you can't get these lovely three-dimensional hollows that way. These cases have to be hand finished and machined first. The bezel expands, flowing at 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock, and then thinning out at the mid case. This has a lovely fluid form, almost like molten metal, flash frozen. And you can see the bezel is concave all the way around. We have a dial that is a fumet, or that's Moser speak for a fade, so light at the center, dark at the edge. Rose gold applique indices. We have faceted rose gold leaf hands for the hours and minutes, and it is a perpetual calendar. Andreas Streller designed this perpetual calendar system for Moser back in 2005, and it's very subtle. As you can see, I have a little index, a little triangular stub index that points to the hours, 12 months, 12 hours. So that's how that works. We have a bi-directional setting system, so I can actually adjust between the months forward or backwards, and this does not need to be sent back to the factory for resetting in the year 2100. It's a very durable system that's almost impossible to break, unlike almost every other perpetual calendar system, which will be unidirectional, fragile, and subject to error in the year 2100. Now, we have a power reserve indicator over at 9 o'clock. The watch has a 7-day rated power reserve, but in fact, it will run for almost 9 days. Now, the movement, this is HMC 341. They make it in-house, and I don't just mean the easy parts like bridges, plates, and wheels. No, they make the escapement, which is solid gold. They make the hairspring, which is a Breguet overcoil, and they make the balance, which is their own. They have a gorgeous decoration with twin golden chatons fixing the barrel arbors, so we have twin mainsprings. We also have 6-position adjustment, so unlike a standard chronometer, which only has to be tested in 5 positions, this is tested in 6, which gives watchmakers no position in which to hide all the crap or the inaccuracy. You can pull some tricks with 5-position adjustment. 6 positions is exacting and uncompromising. Now, this beats away at the aesthetically pleasing rate of 18,000 vibrations per hour, and you can see when Andreas Streller designed the perpetual calendar, he realized that the leap year display was mostly unnecessary. Very rarely would you need the leap year. So we put it on the case back, and you set it with a little trigger on the case flank. You can also see that the case back has a curve to it. They use a curved case back and a cambered sapphire, which is expensive to make, and that helps the watch to fit better on the wrist. This watch is under 50 millimeters from lug to lug, just about 49 millimeters, so it'll wear well on a wrist, in my estimation, as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference, and that curved case back and those sharp, tightly curved lugs really allow it to fit well on a smaller wrist. So this is a great unisex option. This is not. Right here we have a circa 2011 Panerai Luminor 1950 left-handed and it is the PAM 368. So the Panerai Luminor 1950 left-handed 8 days Titanio PAM 368 is a wonderfully nostalgic piece designed to reference the destro styles that were occasionally made by Panerai for the Italian Navy and its allies. But I have to assure everyone watching that though this was originally designed for a left-hander during combat times, as the civilian era of Panerai begins to comprise the majority of Panerai's history, these are understood as ambidextrous watches, and I can easily wear this watch with no discomfort on my left hand, even though the destro was designed to be worn during military service on the right hand. So this is an ambidextrous watch. Don't mistake it for a lefty only. And you can also see that the watch is 47 millimeters in titanium, and mostly sapphire and titanium. It's a light watch, but it's a broad watch, as the lug-to-lug span is about 57 millimeters, so you're not going to want to have a wrist much smaller than mine, 16 centimeters, to wear this well. It's light, but it's big. Now, it's also nicely made. As you can see, the dial is tobacco brown. It's a sandwich dial, which means it's a stencil that features the numerals and the indices on top of a solid disc of lumen. I'm going to do a lume shot right here. And you can see this is probably the world's most distinctive watch in the dark. Now, by day, it has a sapphire crystal. It's a bubble sapphire that's designed to look like a plexiglass, but it is sapphire. We have the device protecting the crown. You can see there's a little runner bearing inside it, and that unlocks and locks the crown. It's 100 meters water resistant, no threading in or out. This preserves the seal of the crown very well, and it also means that you can easily unlock your crown and set the watch, wind it, set it when your hands are wet, sweaty, or gloved. Also, if a conventional crown guard gets hit head on, well, it doesn't offer all that much protection. As you can see with my Zen Easy M1, tough watch, but if you take a parallel hit to the direction of the crown and the stem, you're going to damage it. Whereas with this, originally created again for combat swimmers, you have much more protection for the crown. Now, the watch includes a subsidiary setting mode too, actually, that are worth mentioning. There's one that allows me to move the hour hand independently and then watch the seconds hand. There is a zero reset system, so when I hack the watch and stop the movement, it resets the hand to the index at 60, which makes it a lot easier to synchronize to a reference time. Now, when you turn it over, you can see this uses a version of caliber 2002, 2002/9, 3 barrels, 8 days of power reserve, manual wind, and although it's not a 3/4 bridge, you can see the bridges are actually broken up for easier servicing. It has the look of a 3/4 bridge, as you would have seen on the Panerai watches using the Rolex Cabaret pocket watch movements and later the Angelus SF240. So it has that look, the 3/4 style architecture. These are designed to read as one, and then the longitudinal satination, which is the minimal finishing you would have seen on the original. These are much more nicely finished and comprehensively finished, from the bevels to the satination to the black polished screws. Now, there is a power reserve indicator on the case back, and in one of the more notable quirks and idiosyncrasies of the model, it's actually loomed, which I love. It's fabulous and fatuous all at once. With the 3 barrels and the 8 days of power reserve, you only need to wind this watch once a week, and it's got a full balance bridge with a free sprung index for toughness and shock resistance. You can also see it uses Panerai's quick release lug system, so you press this trigger down with a bar, and then another one forces the bar through the lug, so you can remove the strap just like that to more easily swap straps. And it comes with an upscale gaiter strap, whereas most Panerai watches feature rubber or calfskin. So this is designed to be something of a luxury model, and certainly an unusual piece within the Panerai catalog. Back to unisex watch options. We've got a special one right here. This is a model that was made from approximately 1997 to 2010, and it is the Lange und Söhne Cabaret. It is 27.2 millimeters from side to side, so that's its width, and then it's 42.9 millimeters from lug to lug. But because rectangular watches wear larger, I would say this wears much like a 38 millimeter round watch. That's the way to think of it. It is a unisex option. It's not a ladies' watch. It was not marketed as such, and you can see it wears well on my wrist. This is actually the height of discretion and good taste. A punchy combination of a black dial with a rose gold case, but in a reasonable size and thin enough to fit underneath the cuff. This is a timepiece that hails from one of the great luxury watch manufacturers in the haute de gamme space. And though fairly young, having only been re-established in 1990, Lange und Söhne truly does deserve its reputation as the German Patek Philippe. Now, taking a look at the dial, you can see it's black. What you might not notice at first glance is that the dial is made of sterling silver, and then it's galvanized black. So this little sub-register is the actual color of the dial. The rest of it's been galvanized color. Turn it all over. We have caliber 931, and it's a manual wind with a 42-hour power reserve. You can see it's properly shaped and sized for the watch. So this isn't some sort of hand-me-down movement from another Lange model. This was designed specifically for this application, which is a mark of a true manufacturer, that you're not repurposing an existing movement, but you're creating one that fits the case, both size and shape. Lots to love. Though it's minimalist, you have all of the hallmarks of Lange finish and design. We have a 3/4 bridge. We have pivot jewels for the drivetrain, set in golden chaton that are fixed in place by fired blue screws. We have German silver bridges and plates, a nickel, copper, zinc alloy that is golden because of its copper content. We have black polishing for the case clamp screws, as well as the cap to the escape wheel and the swan's neck regulator, as well as the stud holder. Now, you can also appreciate the fact that though the bridges are not many, we do have mirrored anglage on their edges, and the watch includes engine turning on the base plate. You can see that the balance cock has been freehand engraved, so no two are exactly the same. Moreover, you can see there's a sharp interior angle on the cock for the escape wheel. You can see the black polished cap has that sharp interior angle where two bevels meet. That's one of the toughest assignments for a finisseur, someone who finishes fine movements. So this is a fantastic piece, pin buckle, easy to wear, and amenable to a smaller wrist or tastes that favor discretion and traditional sizes. Also from Glashütte, and this is the real Lange und Söhne. The original Lange company was subsumed into the GUB, the collectivized watch factory, under the communists in the late 40s and 50s. The watch you see here from Glashütte Original represents a product of the legal successor to the original Lange und Söhne. Remember, that company was folded into the GUB. The GUB became this after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Now, if you look closely at the movement, we'll see how close we can get. You can see they still write GUB on the movement itself. You should just be able to see it underneath the balance. But if you can't, you can easily appreciate the remainder of this caliber 9001. 3/4 rotor, double freehand engraved balance bridge, so you can see mirrored on each side. Both sides have been engraved, and we have a duplex swan's neck regulator that has been black polished. Turn it all over, you can see this 2021 model features a green dégradé dial. Now, they have their own dial factory in Pforzheim, Germany, and it creates this dial using a combination of techniques. There's stamping to create the principal features of the dial, and then they use a varnish. So basically, a lacquer-like coating that darkens as it reaches the edge. So it's a dégradé. It degrades from bright to dark. It's a panorama datum or outsized date. This is the PanoMaticLunar, 40 millimeters in rose gold. It does feature a quick set, so you can rapidly set that double-digit date. And then there's a little pusher adjuster for the moon phase. The watch is loomed, though not much. It gives you more than the standard dress watch. And it is simply brilliant, as it's part of the class of 2021 when we saw green dials and green trim and green straps, seemingly for the first time ever across the industry. The watch wears well because its lugs are super short. And again, this is another one that even a lady could consider. It's flat enough at 13 millimeters on the nose that it'll fit underneath the cuff. It's a sporty take on a dress watch, and that thanks to the combination of the rose gold and the green dial. Sticking with our rose gold theme, here we have a model that came out as a 250-piece limited edition for 2010. This is the Jaeger-LeCoultre Memovox Worldtimer. So it's a 40 millimeter Master Memovox, part of the Master Control family. You can see individually numbered. This is number 8 out of 250. And the way this works is you use one crown to wind and set the alarm, as well as quick set the date. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to let you hear the alarm, and it uses a hanging gong rather than beating against the interior of the case, so it has a louder, more resonant, and more musical chime. When fully wound, it will operate for approximately 25 seconds, and it is absolutely loud enough to wake you up in your hotel room while you're traveling. And this is a travel style watch, and the way this works is you acknowledge that there's a world time reference ring, and we have the antipodes paired. So these two cities, in each case, London and Auckland, or New York and Bangkok, they are precisely 12 hours apart on the opposite sides of the world. So that's how that works. And what you'll do is you'll set your current city at 12 o'clock, and then you'll count either forward or backwards to the city that represents the time you wish to discern. And that will give you the time in that city. It is not quite a Louis Cotier world time system, but it is a quick way of referencing the time in the world's 24 principal time zones at a glance, and it adds an additional function to the center disk of the Memovox display. Now, the watch is an automatic winder. It includes the modern JLC caliber 956, which is a 45-hour power reserve. It features the first ever quick set on JLC Memovox. So you can see when I pull the crown out, I have the ability to quick set the date, and I have the ability to adjust the alarm. The watch goes through the Master Control 1000 hours testing process, which evaluates chronometry, power reserve, winding efficiency, durability, and water resistance. And you can see I can set the dial because the index for the Memovox disc is loomed. I can do that in the dark. At 40 millimeters, it wears well on smaller wrists, though it's a little bit chunky. So I'm going to recommend you have a wrist of at least 14 centimeters circumference to wear this watch. It's not going to fit underneath the tightest of dress cuffs, but you're absolutely fine with any kind of a jacket. One of the most practical watches you could ever own, and the emblematic JLC. If you're buying a JLC and you're going to get just one, you get a Master Memovox or you get a Reverso. And this is a re-edition of a watch that came out during the 1950s, the Reverso Worldtime. There were two special dial Reversos during that period, the Worldtime and the Parking. And the Worldtime is by far the more romantic of the two, and possibly to this day still the more useful of the two. Plus, the alarm is the most useful complication in all of watchmaking. You will use it for everything: meetings, catching your flights, cooking. The possibilities are endless. Waking up early on Christmas morning to lay out presents. This watch will be your constant companion and a godsend. Here's a watch that defies description. Well, perhaps one word suffices: spectacular. Launched in 2010 in 1,969 pieces, this is the Zenith El Primero Striking 10th. It takes the traditional 10 beat per second El Primero chronograph and expands 10 seconds over a 360-degree scale, making it easier to read fractions of a second, because what good is a 1/10 of a second chronograph resolution if the scale is so small you can't read it? So it's easy for me, for example, to realize that I'm looking at 1 second, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10. That simple. So 1 8/10 of a second. That's how it works. I can read down to 1/10 of a second, or I can just enjoy the fact that the watch is visually spectacular. Now, the dial is derived from the A386 of 1969, the year the El Primero came out. And the watch includes the overlapping tritone registers. Take a quick look. The lume is good. The water resistance is 100 meters. And the watch is 42 millimeters in diameter in stainless steel. It has a wonderfully vintage-inspired box section sapphire to look like an old plexiglass. And the attention to detail is strong, with a rubber underlay beneath the leather of the strap and a small recess so you can more easily dig your nail into the case back. We have the Striking 10th complication, powered by a double-level silicone wheel. Now, it has 100 teeth, and you can see it's driving the Striking 10th on one level. That is the upper level. It's driving the Striking 10th system. But what it also does is, you can see there's a lower level that meshes with the conventional chronograph clutch, and that drives everything else, including the display of 60 seconds and the 60-minute chronograph register. So we have the
We have the fourth wheel of the movement driving that little pinion that drives the two-level silicon wheel, and the silicon wheel is responsible for the striking 10th as well as driving the remainder of the conventional drivetrain. It has a 50-hour power reserve if the striking 10th isn't in action. It has a quick set date and beats away at 36,000 vibrations per hour. Also worth mentioning, it has a 60-minute register on the dial, which I find to be a lot more useful than the 30-minute registers that are conventionally found on most chronographs. The watch wears well, though it is large, at just over 50 millimeters from lug to lug. You're going to want a wrist of at least 14 centimeters circumference, preferably 15 centimeters circumference, to wear this watch well. But in an era when too many of the Zeniths feel like hand-me-down styles from Hublot, this watch feels like Zenith through and through. Both the company's own shape, dial, and movement. It's a winning trio. Now, jumping to a watch that really took my breath away in 2019, partly because it was so unexpected. The Code 1159 collection from Audemars Piguet was reviled because the automatic and chronograph models had dials that, though well-made and expensive to fabricate, looked flat and cheap in online photos. Well, the one watch that looked like it had everything going on from the beginning was the perpetual calendar, and that's what this is. Always a rare watch and only sold on application. The 41mm rose gold perpetual calendar features an aventurine glass dial in a deep lustrous blue. We have a photorealistic moon phase, and we have a perpetual calendar that gives you the day, the date, the month, the leap year phase, and then outboard there's a little index that shows you the week of the year. This is caliber 5134, so it has a weekly calendar. Now, the dial is wonderful, deep, glossy, bold, and beautiful. Take a quick look at the sapphire. It dips in the center, which creates wonderful refractions, and you can also appreciate the expense of creating a sapphire that has a dihedral from side to side. In profile, you can see that the mid-case is recessed, and it has a rounded octagonal form, which is a reference to the Royal Oak. The bolts that fix the bars that hold the strap on are hexagonal, which is another Royal Oak reference. And if you look, you can see that the lug profiles themselves are evacuated, wonderfully soaring structural buttress-like profiles. Think Gothic cathedral, and you've got the basic idea. There's a dichotomy between the polish and the satin that plays up and gives the watch a lovely nuance, and it's not as thick as you might think, as it's under 12 millimeters thick. Turn it all over and we have the same base caliber that powered the Royal Oak Jumbo we saw earlier. Automatic winding based on the old JLC 920 and immaculately hand finished. You can really see those bezels glowing. Again, 40-hour power reserve and a perpetual calendar. The watch has a quirky vintagey beat rate of 19,800 vibrations per hour, and production of all variants of this movement is always super slow. The watch also includes a modern full deployant clasp, so when it's on your wrist, it's quite secure, and when it's on your wrist, it's beautiful. You can better see just how thin the watch is when it is on my wrist, and while it's still large for a dress watch, it's not awkwardly large. It's a handsome watch, a comfortable watch, and in my opinion, Audemars Piguet's most desirable dress complication. Frankly, this is the AP I love, the AP that earned its holy trinity chops during the 40s, 50s, and 60s, building classically great dress watches, including dress complications. This watch is born of that era and that spirit. If you've seen any watches you like on today's show, remember to reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.